All right. So here we are today in the Pivot course. This is class number 4 of 9. We're in our second month of doing Pivot. And I'm super excited to have a very special guest with us today in Pivot, Ryan North. And you can see on my screen here, I'm going to do a short introduction, then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. Ryan was a student of mine in entrepreneurship at Carleton University's Sprott School of Business, and I wasn't really sure what year that was. I had forgotten, but Ryan remembered it was 2003, so some time ago now. And just like the Pivot course, everybody who studied with me back then and today as well has to start some kind of a business in the 3 months that they study with me. So whether I was teaching at the Sprott School of Business or the University of Ottawa's Telford School of Management, or I'm teaching the Pivot course today, I wanted everybody to start a business during the 3 months they study with me, or if they have an existing business, I wanted them to grow it, right? To get make it bigger and take it to the next level. So I do remember Ryan coming to me, 17 years ago now, and you can see a young Ryan here on the screen. I'll just show you with my cursor. There's a young Ryan sitting in the tree writing, and he said to me he wanted to start, as his business, he wanted to start a comic, an online comic book or online comic. And I said, Ryan, I thought you were an IT guy, an information technology guy. And he said, yeah, I am. I said, can you draw? I said, no, not at all. And I said, oh, that'll be interesting to see what kind of a comic, online comic, an IT person could do who couldn't draw. But since that, in 17 years that I've been following Ryan for all of that time, he's become like an international star with Dinosaur Comics and much more. And you'll notice on the screen here, it's called a fixed art webcomic. What the heck is a fixed art webcomic? I'm going to show you in a second. And you can see here in the bottom left, Ryan at Comic-Con, where he's quite the superstar. He would never tell you that, but I can. So next slide here. So right now he is also a Marvel Comics writer. He writes for the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl series, and I just stole this image off the internet so you can have a look at this Marvel comic that Ryan writes. So this is the original Quants.com Dinosaur Comics thing, that fixed art webcomic that Ryan started back in my class. And this actually, Ryan allowed me to do 1 or 2 like guest appearances. So the words that you see on the screen here are actually mine. I was making a funny joke about the Ottawa Senators and our Bring Back the Senators campaign, and I put it into this. But what Ryan has done is he has these 6 panels. You can see them here, 3 main characters, the dinosaurs. The green one is the big T-Rex. And then he's got 2 females, the smaller dinosaurs there. And what I thought was interesting when Ryan told me about what he was going to do, these 6 images never change. The only thing that changes every day is the actual language, are the words. And when you first look at it, you go, what's the deal here? And then as you read more and more of it, you realize that there's this incredible mind behind it, and that incredible mind would be Ryan's. And I'm not sure if this slide is accurate. Ryan will probably have his own comments on it, but I think he started Quants.com Dinosaur Comics for a negative amount of money, which is great. And the reason it's a negative amount of money is I think Ryan won the business model competition in my class, which gave him $500 towards his startup. So when you looked at the startup costs, which were not very much, I think it ended up being a negative number. So that's a good way to start. And I've said to everyone in the Pivot course that you need to have a magic marketing button. You need to have some kind of marketing that allows you to cost effectively connect with customers. Because if you have to run a Super Bowl commercial before you get your first client or customer, your startup is probably not going to be successful, given that a Super Bowl commercial can cost, $5 or $6 million US for 30 seconds. And I remember asking Ryan how he got so many readers for Quants.com, Dinosaur Comics. And what he did was he registered this URL. I won't mention what the word is, but you can see it on the screen here. And what I think he did, at least that's my recollection from 17 years ago, is he made a bunch of these cutouts, and he went around Carleton University. And because Ryan's so tall, you can't tell on the screen here, he's like 6'8" or 6'9". because he's so tall, he could put these in places that nobody could take it down. So if you were a student in one of my classes and you're a little bored, you're looking up, you would see this URL and you say, what the heck is that? And so people started to chime in. So Ryan's magic marketing button back in the early days was pretty simple, just a bunch of paper cutouts with this URL. And I think, Ryan, it still works now.
Yes, yes, it does.
It still
You can still
results.
visit
So if you put,
poo.ca and see my
there you
my
go.
work.
And then later on, unbeknownst to me, Ryan had this incredible project called To Be or Not to Be, a Choosable Path Adventure. And I'm sure he's going to talk more about it. But he tried to raise $20,000 on Kickstarter, and quote unquote, he failed at that. Instead of raising $20,000, which was his goal, he ended up with almost 581,000 US dollars, which to that point, I think, was the largest amount ever for a publishing project on Kickstarter. And he had over 15,000 backers. It was absolutely incredible and a great success. So, and here are just a few reviews that I just picked off the internet to embarrass Ryan. The Bard would not protest too much, we thinks. Basically, this is the best possible thing you could be doing with your money right now in every conceivable way. I mean, got really wonderful reviews, which also I think probably helped. So if anybody knows viral marketing, it's Ryan Meister, in my opinion. And I've just been so excited when Ryan agreed to show up in the class here. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Ryan, so you can just do a little bit of introduction while I switch the slides.
Sure. Hey, everyone, I'm Ryan. That was a very flattering introduction. Probably the second most flattering introduction I got. I did a talk at Carleton University, my old alma mater once, and the dean of the school gave me an introduction that was so flattering that I felt like go up and be like, "You have the wrong guy. Like, it's just me. I'm just a guy." But yeah, so this is Dinosaur Comics. These are the 6 panels that I started with, and the origin of that is pretty close to what Bruce was describing. If you go ahead, you'll see the next slide, which is the original quants.com webpage. So what Bruce did was he divided the course into thirds. So 3 teams, everyone got in one of the teams, randomly selected, and we each had to set up a business, and whoever made the most money at the end of the course was the winner of the competition. And he registered these 3 random domain names: quants.com, Celerica.com, I still remember, and Bayesium.com. And we got quants. And this is what it looked like. There wasn't a lot there. And this is what we started with. And so our initial idea was actually something IT based. I was the leader of the group, and we thought, well, what if we had like a landing page? Remember, this is 2003. So the idea was it would be a landing page where you type into your browser every day instead of google.com, and you'd see like news feed and the weather using RSS and JavaScript, and basically collating other people's content onto one page, and it would be something you landed on. And the problem with that idea is that it was already being done by places like Yahoo, and also like I wouldn't use this myself. I have no interest in that. Like I could clearly see this was grasping at straws, and this was never going to be anything good. And so we had a 3-month deadline from Bruce, and maybe a month ago by, I had made a mock-up of this landing page that was garbage, and this was not going well. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of Bruce and the rest of the course. And so one weekend I thought, you know what if we did comics instead? And this is sort of a adjacent sidestep, because there was no immediate path to profitability in making a webcomic and putting it online. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the very first comic I ever did. And it's, I will say, with the benefits of 17 years of hindsight, not great. I'll read it to you, and since you're all muted, I won't hear the fact that you're not laughing, but this is where it starts. T-Rex says, "People that be stomping on things, love stomping on things." He gasps. He says, "What's that little house? You wish you're back in your own time? That's too bad for you. Perhaps you too will get a stomping, little girl." Uteraptor interrupts. He says, "Wait, is stomping really the answer to your problem or problems?" T-Rex says, "Problem or problems? My only problem or problems have to do with you interrupting my stomping, crazy Uteraptor." There is the most clear punchline there is maybe problem or problems. The fact I was using brackets, but it is a inauspicious start. But it was a start, and so what I did was I wrote 10 of these comics in one weekend to make sure that I could reuse the images in that way and have comics that worked. And my plan was longer term. This had to run for another 2 months for Bruce's class. I would change the pictures every month. and that would be my brilliant scheme for keeping things fresh. And what actually happened was a month later, I didn't want to change the pictures because that was a lot of work. These are clip arts that I had to pose in the right positions to make them look like the dinosaurs I wanted them to be. And so I didn't and kept with it. Now it's 17 years later, still with the same pictures. But this is where it started. But this is not a business. This is call it an okay comic. So the next step was to put on a website, and we did a very simple website. You can see it in the next slide, Bruce. Very, very simple website of, oh no, I'm ahead of myself, sorry. The next step was put up the website, very simple website, and then we need to do the marketing, the guerrilla marketing. And this is an example I took from McDonald's. It's always bad when large corporations try to do guerrilla marketing because they have the deep pockets to be sued. McDonald's tried this sort of street art and then had to pay for it to be removed by the city because they didn't get the proper permits. Luckily, I was just a guy at Carleton University, and Carleton University did not have that much money to spend on me. So what I did, as Bruce said, is the group made these cardboard cutout T-Rexes, and I wrote poo.ca on all of them, and I slapped them around campus. And as I was and am very tall, I put them in places where people couldn't reach them. And I was back at Carleton University campus for that talk where the dean embarrassed me 2 years ago. And I went back to where I remember the highest ones being. And while the T-Rex was gone, the tail and his head where the tape were still there. And there was actually a shadow. Like when you take a painting off a wall, the wall is lighter behind or darker behind. It hasn't been brightened by light over the years. There's a slight shadow of a T-Rex above the hall.
Ryan, so that is guerrilla marketing par excellence. I mean, people are saying laugh out loud, brilliant, funny. People are really enjoying this. Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Sure, let's do it, yeah. So that was where the start of it was, and this is what the webpage looked like. And I believe emailed my parents to say, here's a comic I'm doing. I encourage the people in the group to do the same, sort of get the word out organically, but that only gets you so far, right? And this was a time where this sort of thing could work. I feel like there was a time, and it was around 2003, where people would visit a URL they saw on a cardboard dinosaur stuck on the wall. And I feel like those days are probably gone. There is not a lot of interest in people visiting sites they see in the real world. I know there was a QR code that I read this major corporation did a QR code, try to get people to scan them on their phones, and it tracked how many hits I got. And after a nationwide campaign, they had something like 16 like double-digit hits. People do not visit websites they see in the world, but they did then. It was still something more novel. And there was also not a lot of entertainment online at that point. YouTube didn't exist, Facebook didn't exist, Twitter didn't exist. Going online was visiting web pages and making your own web pages. So there was a window of opportunity in that time where this could be something you could do. I wouldn't recommend doing it the same way because it probably wouldn't work as well today, but it worked then.
By the way, one of my students, Ember, is saying, it's a compliment, I think. She's calling you the new Banksy. She's calling you the new Banksy.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take it. Thank you.
Well, you know what he gets for his paintings, right?
Yeah, he gets up on the street and he just takes it. He has a thing where now people will preserve his work because it has such value. So getting tagged by Banksy is a compliment, where before it was like, oh, I got to clean my wall. Like you've heard me.
If Banksy wants to draw something on my house, come on over.
You'll let him, yeah.
My house will be worth a lot more. In fact, the Banksy mural, Ryan, will be worth more than my house.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So take a look at this webpage, and then Bruce, go to the next slide. You'll see what the webpage looks like today. It's prettier. It's less objectively ugly, but it's still basically functionally the same. You have the title at the top. You have links to merchandise. You have the comic. There's stuff underneath. Go to the next slide again, Bruce, and this highlights what the comics are, or where the links are. So we have this merchandise. I put the word sexy there from the very beginning because people click on the word sexy. Sex sells, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
There's a link at the top linking you to a particular piece of merchandise. In this place, a plush toy that we'll see later. Beneath every comic, there's an ad that's basically saying, here's a book, you should buy it. You can buy prints of the comics. And then there's feeds to follow the comic and see it in different places and to just share it online. So all of this is basically saying, here's the comic, you can read it for free, maybe you'd like to buy some merchandise. And that was and remains the business model for the comic. And that is what we sold in those couple months that made money that let us win the competitions. We sold, I think it was $400 worth of merchandise in those couple months. And that was done on a print on demand thing that we'll get to in a second of how that business model worked. Can you hop to the next slide, Bruce?
Yeah, just before I do that, I want to point out to the students, you can get a plush toy here, and it's not a plush toy of the T-Rex, it's the wee Rex, right? The little wee tiny Rex.
A tiny T-Rex, yeah.
Exactly. And so when people first stumble on quants.com, on Dinosaur Comics, they kind of go, what's the big deal here? Why are hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people reading this? And again, it's because there's a really clever mind behind this. And, you're not selling a T-Rex plush doll, you're selling a wee Rex doll. And I think this kind of sense of humor, it really suits not just your age group now, because you're close to 40 now, but the millennials who are just a little bit behind you, the 30-year-olds, they really have this kind of offbeat sense of humor. And I think you really got that.
Yeah, it helps, I think, to be sincere in what you're doing. And there is an element of ludicrousness to a talking dinosaur comic where the pictures don't change. So we all understand that this is on its core a little bit silly, and we can lean into that and have fun with it. These you're seeing now are various shirt designs I've done over the years. That wizard has turned you into a whale. Is this awesome? Yes, no. That's like a text adventure, early computer game joke. That shirt was my bestseller for years and years and years. People made parodies of it. It was a profitable design. Failure is just success rounded down, came from a punchline in a comic people liked, so I made a shirt design and it worked out very well. There's T-Rex being pulled by balloons, just cute. There's a Japanese T-Rex in the corner. All of these were shirts that we made, and these were, when I was in Bruce's class, these were not the designs I had. What I had were full color designs of the dinosaurs, and I think that was basically just the T-Rex on a mug, on a shirt, on a poster, that sort of thing. And these were done through a company called Cafe Press, which still exists, and there's many more like it, Redbubble and others, where basically you upload a picture to their service, you position it on their virtual shirt and mug and hat and everything, and then they will sell this merchandise for you if someone happens to buy it. So it's effectively on-demand dropshipping, and it works great for testing the market. So I could find out that, yeah, there was some interest in t-shirts, but the margins are horrible. I would sell a shirt for $20 and I would make $1 on that shirt. So that was what I did for, after I finished Bruce's class, I kept the comic going because I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the writing and the process and meeting fans and all that sort of thing. And by the time I finished my grad degree, I kind of had this choice, right? Like I'd now had a master's in computational linguistics, and the two career paths were get a real job or be an internet cartoonist. And to be an internet cartoonist, all I had to do was fail to get a job, which is really easy. I just didn't apply anywhere. And then a month later, I was now a full-time cartoonist. I recommend it. Setting goals that you need to fail, you can hit those every time. So when I reached that point, the major change I made to Dinosaur Comics, which was now my full-time job, is at that point I was making around, what was it? Let's say around $400 a month doing print-on-demand shirts. So if someone put up a design, someone ordered it, they'd send me the money. I did nothing, no shipping, I just got the checks in the mail. But this was making $1 a t-shirt. And so I realized that if I went to screen printing, which is how most t-shirts are printed, where you have a screen that, there's some startup costs. You have a screen that's made with your design, one for each color. So that balloon shirt we're seeing, there'd be a green screen for the green balloons, a yellow screen for the yellow balloons, a red screen for the red balloons, a black screen for the T-Rex's belly, a white screen for the T-Rex's head, and then those blue balloons, I'm cheating because that's the color of the shirt. So that's a 5-screen design. And that means I have to pay to set up those 5 screens, and also pay to have them printed. However, this scales up really nicely. So what I would do is I would order 500 of these shirts in a median curve of small, medium, large, extra large, 2 extra large. And then when these sold for $20, I would make $10 of profit. So the margins were much better. So simply by changing, by having the money I had raised by this print-on-demand stuff to now afford actual shirts with better margins, I could invest that money and suddenly start, making 10 times as much money on the same piece of merchandise. So that was something that allowed this to become a full-time job that could sustain me in my fabulous student lifestyle at the time. And to do this, I calculated I made $10 a shirt. I need to sell 3 shirts a day to make food and rent. And at the start, that was terrifying, right? Because I don't buy shirts that often. Who is going to need 3 shirts every day for the rest of my life? And I remember trying to imagine these 3 sort of presumably topless people who are like, today's the day, and Ryan's going to be the guy who changes it for me. But they did, and I realized that at a large enough scale, there is someone who was going to be needing that shirt. And I used to get really stressed when it was noon and I hadn't sold 2 shirts yet. I needed that 3rd shirt to break even for that day. And there were some days when I didn't, and there were some days where I sold, 50 shirts. And realizing that this amortizes out and averages out to a predictable, sustainable level is great, and sort of underlined the advantage of doing things online, which is you don't have a boss and you can't be fired. Instead, if Dinosaur Comics has 70,000 readers and I have 70,000 tiny bosses, and I don't need to keep all of them happy, I just need to keep some of them happy so that they will continue to support me and read the comic and buy some merchandise. Can you have the next slide, Bruce?
Yeah, before we do,
Yeah.
I just want to comment to the rest of the class. So what Ryan is saying is that drop shipping is great. Drop shipping is great because you don't have to do any work, but the margins are very low. And by bringing it in-house, obviously, he was able to get 10 times the amount of money in exchange for doing some extra work and taking on some extra risk. I get that. By the way, Ron, I know you know this, in the book publishing business, it's the same. On some of the books that I've written, I had an offer from a major publishing house to help me out. And when I examined their contract for some of the books that I was writing at the time, out of a $20 or $25 or $30 item, I would make 47 cents.
Yeah.
So you would have been doing better at $1 on a $20 t-shirt than I would have been on say a $25 or $30 book. And so what I decided to do was just put them on my own website, sell the ebooks for $9.95 or whatever it is, $10.
That's all profit.
And that's all margin, right? So unfortunately, the world is tilted in favor of huge companies and a little bit against all of us entrepreneurs. But Ryan is right. Drop shipping is no risk and no hassle, but very little money. All right.
Yeah, and we actually just a couple of years ago, that my shipping company that a friend of mine started, I was his first customer, kind of started together, but I'm not an investor, I'm just a client. He invested in a print-on-demand printer so that now when I have a new design, instead of having to roll the dice and invest this money in a shirt, I can put up for sale and see if it sells. We'll sell a few low margin copies, get that free market research from paying customers, and then roll that into a professionally screen printed shirt that it's the same quality, it's just costs us 10 times less to produce once we have that.
Yeah.
And I mean,
and
sorry, go on.
Interrupt you there. David Perry, who's a very successful author like you are, and he sold millions of copies of his books. Guerrilla marketing for HR, for human resources. He's written a whole series on guerrilla marketing for human resources and acquiring personnel. And he wrote to you and everyone actually. That he gave Wiley back their check, and he went from a 5% royalty to 21% royalty. So other people on the other students on this call have had the same experience that you and I have had, Ryan.
Yeah, and I mean, publishing is a very weird industry in a lot of ways. With those royalties, you're kind of trading profits for access to their network. So I've done self-published books like this Dinosaur Comic book up on the slide. We publish that ourselves, printed it ourselves. Everything is in-house. I make a lot of money when those sell. I've also done works through publishers, and there, I'm making that same very low royalty, but I'm hopefully getting access to these larger bookstores and making it up in the margin. But it's a choice you have to make, and you should make it an informed choice, because there are tons of publishers who will gladly buy up your rights for a pittance and then pay you nothing for them because of the contract you signed. And Bruce, I think the most valuable thing you've said is read the contracts. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Something else that Jason Means is saying is that he runs an e-commerce business, and he does a combination of drop shipping and the actual physical shipping. So there might be a model in between, and just the way that Ryan has some books that he's self-published and some books he's published through a major publishing house, there might be other models in between.
yeah, I feel like it would be sealed to say always do it this way or always do it the other way, because projects change, circumstances change, and there's definitely room in the margins to maneuver there. This design here on the left, this, let's say you've gone back in time, started as a t-shirt design. This is the poster version of it, that has a bit more color and trees in the background. This design is something that I then sold a bunch of shirts, and I made it into a poster, and then I wrote a book about it. The idea of, like, if you go back in time, how would you rebuild civilization? And here's a copy of it, How to Invent Everything, a survival guide for the stranded time traveler. And that is an idea that I had, and I kept iterating on in different ways and different formats. And in a sense, like that book is probably the world's first book based on a t-shirt, but it's also a version of that idea that became more and more in detail. Because this poster is exploring that idea, but it's not quite solid enough yet. I want it to be like a physical, here's how you rebuild civilization from scratch. And that took a couple of years to research. And then I sold that to a publishing house and did it that way. But it's, I think the lesson is you can always, there's value in stuff you've already done, even if you've already published it. And I was worried that someone would write their own book because I put the idea out there, but I was lucky enough that they didn't. Can you have the next slide, Bruce? So this is the Wee Rex there, the plush thing. And this is probably one of the things I'm most happy about with Dinosaur Comics, is that because the comic has become popular, this fictional character I've created is now living things that I have always wanted to do. I've always wanted to go to space, and I've always wanted to go to Antarctica. And this is a photo of that T-Rex plush reflected in the ceremonial South Pole in Antarctica. If you go to the next slide, this gentleman who was a fan of mine brought T-Rex with him to the South Pole and took photos of him at the geographic, magnetic, and ceremonial South Poles. And I was like super excited, but also kind of jealous of this imaginary character I made up, because he's living my life, he's having my adventures. And then shortly after that, someone attached a Wee Rex to one of those weather balloons you send up with the camera to the edge of space where they pop and the camera falls down, you recover your footage. T-Rex has also been to the edge of space without me.
Wow.
So it's, I just have these slides because I love that the places things can go surprise you, and you can't really predict where something is going to end up. And if I had never met Bruce, I would never have taken this course, never started this comic, and there would never have been a neon green T-Rex at the South Pole biting the ceremonial South Pole there.
Ryan, when you said that if I had any hair left, which I don't, it would be standing up. Thank you for that. I want to show you something else. These are my Prof. Bruce wristbands. They have 4 words on them. Believe in yourself. Act. If you want to change your life, you have to act. Once you find something that you really enjoy doing and you make a living at, say no to everything else. Treat everything else as a hobby. So use this word no a lot. And then there's this word here, which is verify. Only have people in your life and in your business that you like and trust. Trust is a big thing. And it's actually branded on the inside. It's called you probably can't read it, but it doesn't matter. The @Prof. Bruce Power Circle. And guess what? One of my clients went to the South Pole. He took a picture right there.
Oh my God.
And he had this on. And he sent me that. I didn't really make the connection until you just explained what the slide was. But when he sent that to me, I just about fell off my chair. I've got it on my computer somewhere.
That's incredible. That's amazing. Yeah, the idea of something you've had a hand in going to these fantastic places is so gratifying. That's terrific. And I really agree with the value of saying no too. After this call, I have another call where I'm about to say no to someone. So this is a quote from my friend John Allison, who's another cartoonist. And he was saying, if I had 1 penny per comic per reader, I wouldn't have to run ads, sell merch, or do anything except sit in my castle. Because what we do is give away comics for free, and that gets you a large audience. This is a hit graph from maybe his comic, maybe mine, showing about 70,000 hits a day. That would work out with a penny per comic. If they read 1 comic a day, only 1 person read only 1 comic, that would add up to about a yearly salary, I did the math earlier, of $250,000 a year. that would be great. That's not how it is. Like I've never made $250,000 a year from giving away comics for free and selling merchandise. And you can start thinking of this as like, oh, he's leaving money on the table. Like, why doesn't he charge for comics? Why doesn't he do something else to make more money from these people? But um, that sort of putting a gateway between people and your work is always a harder sell than giving it away for free. And the main takeaway I'm trying to get to, that we'll get to in a second, is that it's much more valuable in my experience and in my opinion to have fans than it is to sell tickets. So can you up to the next slide, Bruce?
Before I do that, can I ask you this question?
Shoot.
Hasn't Google and Facebook and some other services, haven't they proven this model? If you look at the mainstream media in the early 1990s, they were at the peak of their power. If you were a local newspaper, a national newspaper, you dominated, and almost all of the ads were sucked into that newspaper. And then Google started to give away its search results, and Facebook said, you can create an account for free. And then they sucked up billions, maybe even trillions of dollars of ads. And the mainstream media today, 30 years later, Ryan, is much, 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 infinitely smaller than it was 30 years ago, and infinitely less relevant. So doesn't that suggest that your model is correct?
I think so. I've been using it, so I clearly am biased towards it. But there's some slides up ahead. We'll be talking about Twitter and Facebook and what has happened to the online space that touches on that. But here's some quote I found talking about how this is before the new trilogy. So this is a couple years out of date, but it's saying, of total revenue made by Star Wars, only 6.6 has been generated at the box office. That's selling the product you made, is 6.5 billion, and more than 9 billion, 1.5 times, has been through merchandise. And this is the idea of, if you could sell a movie for 6 billion, then make 9 billion in merchandise, how many more fans would you have? How much more money could you make if you sold a movie for $0 and spread it out that way? The larger thing is, Star Wars is not the greatest example for that because everyone knows Star Wars, but even so, it's made more money from merchandise than it has through the actual product they're ostensibly selling. Because these days they're not selling a movie, they're selling a whole vertical channel of everything Star Wars. Hit the next slide, Bruce, please. So here's the big takeaway of, a fan is worth more than a ticket. And this is where the Kickstarter comes in, which I believe is the next slide. Yes. So this is the Kickstarter that Bruce mentioned, where it was 2012, and I had this idea of doing a choose your own adventure version of Shakespeare. So I'll take Hamlet and I'll make it into a book where you decide what happens next. You can play as Ophelia or King Hamlet or as Hamlet himself, and all these choices. A big idea. I'm going to write this book. I take a year, maybe more like 9 months, and I write the first draft. And I say, great, now I want to publish it. What's the best way to do this? And in this time, I had co-edited an anthology series of short stories called Machine of Death. And we had taken this book, written it, and tried to shop it to publishers, and nobody wanted it because it had 3 strikes. It was an anthology. Nobody reads anthologies. It was a science fiction anthology, and it had no big name authors. The premise of the anthology was there's a machine that tells you how you're going to die. It doesn't say when, it just says how. So you stick your finger in, it takes a blood test, a little piece of paper comes out that says old age, and you think, great, I'm going to live till I'm 100 years old. And then the next day, an old man in a car runs you over, and you go, oh, old age, I get it now. There could be this old world irony to it. So that was the premise, and nobody wanted it. And one of the publishers told us, if you had pictures here, that might help. So we commissioned a bunch of art from all our friends. So every story had an illustration. And again, nobody wanted it. And we were strung along by publishers for 5 years.
Wow.
Easily. Exactly, it was 5 years. Until we finally said, you know what, we're going to publish it ourselves. And we put it on Amazon's Create Space program, which is a print-on-demand program. And we linked to it and said, here's the book you've been waiting for 5 years, go buy it. And on that day, we became the #1 best-selling book on Amazon.com. What we didn't realize...
I remember.
Sorry?
I remember.
Yeah, what we didn't realize was most books are dropped by publishers on a certain day, and we had hit that day. And we had accidentally pushed Glenn Beck out of #1, and he was at that time accustomed to being a best-selling author. And he called us out on his show as being part of a liberal culture of death, which sold us more books. And we actually sent him a book, a copy of Machine of Death, with a piece of paper inside, like a death prediction, and it said paper cut. and we never heard back from him. But I mentioned that to say, like, this taught me the value of the network, like the people you know. And when you're working in a creative space, you meet a lot of other creative people. And so for when I want to do my own book, To Be or Not to Be, I thought, well, let's illustrate every ending with a picture. And I contacted a bunch of artists I know and said, would you be willing to do a commission for me? Here's the book, here's what I'm paying, here are the sizes, here's the format. And I invested, I don't know how much money, it was about $200, I think, a commission. So several $1,000s easily in these pictures. And then I had a book that was illustrated and written. I needed to publish it. So I went to Kickstarter, and on Kickstarter, I said, here's the book, here's a picture, here's all the artists involved. It's going to be so great. I'm so excited. And I asked for, like Bruce said, $20,000, and we hit that goal in under an hour. And the reason it went so fast was not because I'm some incredible, amazing writer, but it was because it was a concept that you could easily get, Choose Your Own Adventure Shakespeare, and it had all these artists who had their own fans behind it. And so they could link to it and say, hey, here's a cool project. I have a part of this. If you like me, get the book. You'll see some original art by me. And also, it kind of functions as this art gallery for all these other great artists. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that by the end of it, we had raised, again, $580,000 for one book of Choose Your Own Adventure Shakespeare. The other sort of cute story about that was when I had this book, when I'd written it and got to commission the pictures, I'd also at that point gotten a literary agent. And literary agents act as a go-between between you and large publishers. And I said, well, let's test the water. So I gave the book to my agent and said, what do you think? Can we publish this through a large publisher? And he read it, and to his eternal credit, he was like, look, I want to work with you. I think we could do good work together, and I want to show you how good I am, but you will make more money and be more successful on Kickstarter with this, because this is a hard sell. This is a book that is Shakespeare, which is, you know, esteemed, but not exactly tearing up the bestseller charts. It's Choose Your Own Adventure, which is normally thought to be juvenile. And you don't have any history in this medium. You're known in comics, and this is prose. So what you should do is publish it yourself, do it on Kickstarter, make $1 million, and then when it's time for the sequel, I can sell that. And that's exactly what happened. I did it on Kickstarter. It was super successful. I had publishers calling me saying, we'd love to publish this, and I said, no, I'm doing it myself. And then once the book came out, I wrote a sequel called Romeo and or Juliet and sold that to a traditional publisher. And it ended up being pretty much, I feel like it was the right choice. The money made was about the same, but I had access to the publisher's network. So I could, when you're working online, you can sell to your people, your fans, but this gave me access to bookstores and other things. And it worked out so well that when we were reprinting the first book, I said, I've already sold this book to everyone I know. So you can publish the mass market edition through an official publisher, and that will be in bookstores and reach people that I don't know and can't reach and don't know about Dinosaur Comics. So it's treating your own people as a channel and the rest of the world as a second channel, I think, is a good way to conceive of what you're giving up and what you can get when you're making partnerships with larger publishers and distributors and things like that. So if you go to the next slide, this brings us to 2011, 2012. That's when I first wrote these slides. And now we're in 2020. Go to the next slide. I have a nice 2020 image. And the internet is a different place, right? Like, this is not the same internet it was. When I started out, the internet was a network of distributed computers, super open. I think I have a picture of that on the next slide, Bruce. Yes. And that is not exactly where we are anymore. Where we are online is this image of the walled garden, where you want to stay inside this little space. Next slide, Bruce. There it is, a walled garden. Pretty, beautiful. Don't ever look over that wall. And this has been tried before. In the early 90s, AOL tried to make their own service a walled garden. Can you hit the next slide button, Bruce? I go real quick through these part of the slides. And like, this is what America Online wanted, to be an ISP that kept you off the internet. You would stay in their chat rooms, in their little squares, and not see the larger internet, because larger internet was something that they couldn't control. And of course, it was much more interesting than AOL, and AOL stopped doing that, eventually failed and became a whole different company. But this walled garden was something that we were all sort of struggling against and fighting against, and have now kind of stumbled back into. if you look at open standards, if you go to the next slide, Bruce, there's a thing called RSS, which was a free way and an open way to distribute information to other websites. And that is now effectively, if not literally dead. I still have an RSS feed for Dinosaur Comics. I love the format, but Google Reader, or Google killed their RSS reader, Google Reader, and that really hurt the standard. Next slide, Bruce. So it's now hard to distribute your stuff online to other websites. Another example of that is websites themselves. We used to use bookmarks. We used to, when I started Dinosaur Comics, people would visit 3 or 4 or 5 websites a day at the start to see what was new. That's dead. Most of us go on Facebook, we go on Twitter, and we see what shows up there. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. You log on, you say, what's this? I'm going to read it. It's whatever's viral that day. Hit the next slide, Bruce. So that's on the way out. Net neutrality, the idea of you shouldn't have to pay to access different websites, is no longer the law of the land in the States. It's not dead completely, but it's getting there, and there are companies that are trying to make you, we'll give you free access to our video site, but you have to pay for YouTube. This now puts you as an entrepreneur, as a creator, caught between these two Goliaths who are having their own fight, and that you're going to lose there. Next slide, Bruce. And next slide after that too. So this is one of the main villains that you have to fight with is Facebook. They are doing all they can to keep people on their platform. And they want you to have a Facebook page and to put stuff on Facebook for them. But you're supplying content for free to Facebook when you do that. You gain access to your Facebook fans. But long ago, years ago, they said, okay, if you have fans, you now have to pay to access them, or we'll only show your content to like 10% of them. So they're charging you coming and going, and you're not being an entrepreneur at that point. You are working for free for a giant company and giving them free content in the hope that some of that money will trickle down to you. Next slide. Twitter is the same way. This is a place where you view content and it is almost entirely divorced from its origin. You're just consuming whatever's showing up that day. Next slide, Bruce. And yes, there is viral media. There is stuff that goes viral. And I've had comics myself go viral, but that is a one-hit sort of thing. There has never been a person alive, maybe there has, there's very few people alive who have said, I saw a really funny tweet 2 weeks ago. I'm going to go back and see if there's more from that particular person. Or I saw a funny comic 3 days ago. I wonder if there's a new one from that guy. Most people have forgotten 3 days down the road, and they're looking for the new funny comic or the new funny tweet or the new funny Facebook post. That's today's thing. And it's very, very hard to build an audience in that circumstance because you're only as good as your last tweet, your last Facebook post, your last comic. And you are kind of faceless. You're just the funny joke of the day. And it's very hard to stand out and to be sticky, to get people to continue to follow you when they're only seeing one blip of this content once in a while.
Ryan, can I comment on something?
Yeah, please.
So back in the early days of the internet, at least the public-facing internet, would have been 92, 93. I was, I think, the first or among the first of Carleton University's professors to have a web page. It wasn't much of a web page, but it was a web page. And I put my course descriptions on my website. I put all the information that people would need to look at, because back in 92, 93, when the web was really getting going, there was a real fight. Were we going to go in the direction of MIT or in the direction of Harvard University? Harvard wanted everything behind a paywall. So guys, if you wanted to, study a Harvard University case study, you had to pay for it. MIT went the other way. MIT said, and that's the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. MIT said, we're going to put, you can go, still to this day, you can go on to MIT's website, you could take a calculus course for free. The materials there, the professors put their notes there, all kinds of really great material there, because what MIT said is the delta factor that we're selling is the opportunity for smart students to get together on campus with hopefully smart professors and have a really collegial and Socratic experience. Yep. And so I embraced, Brian, back in the early days of the internet, when you might have been working for domains at cost for all I know, Rob Hall, I embraced the MIT method. And so after about a year, I get a call from the director of the School of Architecture, and I get called onto the carpet, and he orders me to take down my website. He said, "We want everything behind a paywall. We want our information to be, protected, and it's our intellectual property, and we object to your website being public-facing and free." And so I said, is that an order? And my director said, yes. So I put everything behind a paywall. Everything was password protected. And I did that for a year. And then after a year, I quietly took it down.
Yeah, I mean, this is the core of it, is of like you give it away for free and you can build an audience and build a reputation. And there's so much benefit from that MIT clearly saw and continues to see that is not there when you're just hiding it away from people. But that's getting more and more hard to see. Like, this is an example of my Twitter feed yesterday. I think I can see people talking to me, what's scrolling through the feed. But Twitter is a noisy medium. It's something I glance at once in a while. It's not something that I'm looking at to, form a new relationship with someone. It's just entertainment in bite-sized hits. And that's sort of the core of what internet has been. Besides the science part of it, the communication part of it, it's entertainment, and you're looking for that hit of dopamine and serotonin, which, if you go to the next slide, Bruce, are technically the only two things you enjoy. And this is a comic my friend Drew did. He has a comic called Toothpaste for Dinner. You may have seen this before. You may not have seen this exact version of this, because this joke has been ripped off and resold by other people so many times that it's hard to tell where the original source is. I can get the next slide, Bruce. So this is his website. He just does these simple comics. He also, I mean, he can draw better than I can, but he's no, I was gonna say Picasso. He might be a bit of a Picasso, but he's clearly not a skilled artist.
He's not a Michelangelo.
He's not a Michelangelo, that's for sure. If you go to the next slide, this is sort of the challenge we face today, is that because of social media, people who are entrepreneurs and people who are just regular people have been conditioned and trained to try to do stuff in this social space, to go for those likes, to go for those favorites, get those retweets. And it is, I believe at best, a very short-term solution, because you are a blip. You disappear, you'll scroll out the feed the next day, and you're not really building an audience. You're building hits, and you're doing it on the terms of another company, and on the terms of Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, which is, again, you're giving your stuff to them for free, and they're going to profit from it and maybe give you some of it. And yes, there are YouTube stars making millions, and there are TikTok stars making money, and there are people who have turned Twitter feeds into books. Absolutely. But those are the exceptions and not the rules. Those are the lottery winners who have been in the right place at the right time with a fair amount of luck and managed to extract value from this. But most people will never do that. And it's insane to try to get rich by playing the lottery. Like, that is a way to lose your money. But that is the structure that social media has imposed on creative people, and even regular people, business people, any sort of person trying to get the word out today, is to break through these walled gardens of Facebook and Twitter. You know, the next slide, Bruce. So this is sort of the main points here. Working in a corporate context is challenging. The open internet is dying, being replaced by walled gardens. People don't visit websites anymore, which would have sounded insane 10 years ago. They have an internet without people visiting websites, but they mostly visit Twitter and Facebook, and Twitter and Facebook will do what they can to try to keep you on those sites. As a guy with a website, I make some money from advertising on Dinosaur Comics, but when you click on a link on Facebook, they have a technological standard that tries to load content within Facebook. So you're getting a copy of that site, just the text on their site, that doesn't show your ads. So they're getting your content for free and not showing the ads for it. You're working on other people's networks. Your content is adding value to them. Anything you get back is spillover, but you are giving your stuff up for free to them. Viral content is privileged over authorship. The audience cares about content, not the creator. You can't build fans in anonymity. And it's the whole idea of what have you done for me lately? And then there's also the problem of theft, theft of content, theft of jokes, ideas, everything. And this is, not new. There's a long tradition of a successful business plan being implemented and other people stealing that business plan and trying to make it even better. What's changed online is that it's now not just entrepreneurs, not just business people, but everyone doing this, because everyone wants to have a higher follower count and look creative and funny and attractive and everything else. I have an example of this. I've got the next slide, Bruce. This is a comic my friend Anthony made. And I love that there's two readings of this. One is the person on the left says, I made this. Person on the right says, you made this? Beat. Then he says, I made this. He's realizing that this is his thing and this person stole it and then tried to give it back to him. The other reading is the person on the left actually made this, and the person on the right, once he had it for 10 seconds, decides, no, I made this. This is mine. This is something that I created. If you go to the next slide, there's a tweet I made in 2014. My friend Lucy said peanut butter and jealous. I thought that was an amazing phrase. And I tweeted, Lucy introduced me to the phrase peanut butter and jealous, and I can never go back to what I so blindly called a life before. Pretty funny, 114 retweets, nice shot of dopamine for old Ryan. And then this is what happened over the next little while. Bruce hit next like 5 times with 10 seconds in between them. This guy named Rizma stole it. And what bothered me is that he stole the Lucy part. He even subbed in a friend's name. He just blindly copied and pasted because he wanted a joke. Raider, 2018, 4 years later, this guy stole the joke for his own feed. Again, kept Lucy. It happens again with Eric, and again with this next person, and again, and again, and again, with people just taking something I created and passing it off as their own work. And in this context, if you make something that you're trying to sell, the same thing happens. I've had people rip off that whale design so many times on print-on-demand pages. On the most exotic one was someone had made a copy of my shirt design and put it in Second Life, where they were selling virtual copies of that shirt for people to wear. And it is incredibly frustrating because I can send a DMCA takedown notice to prevent these sales. I don't get money from the sales I made in the past. It just makes them stop. But it only works some of the time. All they have to do is create a new account and do it again. And what's most supremely frustrating as a guy in technology who knows IT is that it's so easy to, if someone uploads an image, to just do a search and see if that image exists elsewhere. And then you can know that this is possibly stolen from another person. But none of these companies do it because the Cave press I was using, the Redbubble print-on-demand places you can use now, they all make money too when someone sells a shirt. And for them, they don't really care if it's your shirt design or a stolen shirt design. They make the same money either way. So rather than implement this technological solution to a sociological problem, which is really rare when you have that, they just let it slide. And you can spend almost a full-time job sending these takedown notices. I don't do it. It's eventually become pointless. But this is the challenge you face, is people will take what you do and rip it off. I think there's another slide there, another person. The last one covers up my name, which is symbolic, because now it's just out in the world. So this is an example of a profit version of that. This is someone on Etsy selling a free and wild luggage tag, and someone on Etsy selling a wild and free luggage tag. I don't know what's the original. I know one's cheaper, so that's probably the knockoff. But this is a challenge to someone who is trying to make money, gain fans, start a business, move merchandise online, if this can happen so easily. It is exactly the same on Amazon. People can download a book, repackage it, and upload it. And there's been times where I've asked my wife, and she's volunteered to spend a day sending takedown notices, but that only catches the stuff you see. And that's a finger in the spigot that is not going to be there indefinitely. Videos, everything is the same way. It is a challenge, and it's not something that really I found a solution for. If you go to the next slide, this is my last slide. Solve this problem and you've made yours and thousands of other creative businesses sustainable. I don't expect you to solve it. I can tell you my solution, which is not even a solution, it's a work around it, is I have branched out the income streams I use for myself. So Dinosaur Comics used to be the only thing I did, and I sold merchandise, and it was a great life. But now I have Dinosaur Comics merchandise. I do the work for Marvel that Bruce mentioned, comics writing. I do the books through publishers that also makes money. All of it is a bunch of different income streams that add up to something that is valuable and sustainable. But it allows me to adjust. So if income from Dinosaur Comics goes down, I can shift and put more resources towards other things. So it's relying on a bunch of small feeds coming in rather than one thing, which sort of goes back to that initial idea I had of having 70,000 tiny bosses. I don't have 70,000 tiny income streams, but I have a handful of income streams so that if I get fired from one, I'm not unemployed. I just go to these other ones that keep it going. And I have colleagues who started in webcomics and still only do webcomics. And some of them, that's been sustainable, and some of them have had to go get a day job because there was no longer enough money in it. Ad prices are down because the internet, people don't visit web pages anymore. It's harder to find new readers because people are only looking at what's recent and not looking to form a deeper relationship, not looking to find something new to read. They'll just read Twitter. Like that scratches that itch for dopamine for them. They don't need anything more. So it's a challenge, and my solution to it is at best a dancing around a sort of stopgap measure. But the internet has gone, I think this is very depressing, from something that was very open to entrepreneurship and new ideas and new people to something that is almost actively hostile towards it, with print-on-demand sites that allow anyone to rip off your work and they don't care because they're getting paid, with things like Twitter and Facebook just waiting for you to give them free content so that they can then sell that to other people and put ads on top of it and then sell you your own audience back to you. It's a challenge, and it's not one that I have seen an easy solution to, but it's also not insurmountable. I don't want to be like dour and say the internet is doomed. There's so much potential there still, but you just have to be clever and maybe a bit sneaky about it.
Well, I have to say, Ryan, that was one of the best hours I've ever spent. I just, I don't know, I think I speak for everybody here that that was really fantastic. There's some questions that, can you stay on for a few more minutes?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
All right, we won't keep you too much longer, but I did want to comment on something, and this might be something that that you might not be comfortable with, but I want to tell you about a model that I've been using for the things that I've been publishing. I've been using a sponsorship model. And so when I'm thinking about writing a book, I will think about which organizations might be interested in it. So for example, if I'm writing a book on real estate, because I might know something about real estate, I'll say, oh, maybe the Real Estate Investor Network might be interested in this book. And so what I'll do is I'll go to a group like RAIN, Real Estate Investor Network, and I'll say, look, I've written this great handbook on, retire rich, retire early through real estate. Would you be interested in providing a copy of it to your membership? And maybe they have 10,000 members. They said, well, how much is that going to cost us? Well, I said, I sell the book for $9.95, for an e-copy on my website. But how about I give it to you for $1? And you could send out, for 10,000 bucks, you could send out 10,000 copies of it. It costs $1 a member, and it's a nice benefit for them. Ryan, I think I wrote Don't Back Down for the 25th anniversary of the founding of the Ottawa Senators. And I went to the Ottawa Senators, and at that time I said, how many season tickets holders have you got? They said, well, about 10,000. And how many, corporate sponsors, signed sponsors, et cetera. And they said, oh, another 2,000. I said, well, why don't I give you a copy, $1 a copy, and you can send out 12,000 copies of the book to your, that's not very much money. I recognize that. Maybe, if I was Ryan North, I could charge a little more than $1 a copy.
It's $12,000.
But it's $12,000 and it's $10,000. But even more important for somebody like me, it has helped me, expand my network, right? So. So I don't know if you would be comfortable with that as a model for somebody starting out, but there is a sponsorship model that does work.
Yeah, no, I think there are tons of different ways to do this. I mean, people often ask me, like, how do you write for Marvel? What's your career path to become a Marvel writer? And I say, like, don't do what I do. I did a comic online for 10 years, for a decade, before I got any print work. And the reason I got that print work is because a reader got a job at a comic books company and thought they should hire me because she thought it was funny. And that worked out great, but that is a 10-year process to get one job. If my goal was to write at Marvel, I would not have done what I was doing. My goal was to be self-supported and do this fun comic and enjoy myself while I was doing it. And this other stuff that diversified from that was a nice to have, but not a way not what I was aiming towards. And I think, like, there's so many ways to get that foot in the door to start out. And writing a book and doing a sponsorship thing seems to me like a really clever way to, you've got, not everyone's going to read it, but you've got a bunch of people who are aware of you. They've gotten something that they, not only for free, but they perceive it to have value because they know like this is something that normally sells for this price, and we got this special deal through this relationship with Bruce. This is all stuff that increases the perceived value of the book, and it makes it even more likely people are going to read it. Makes it even more likely. Pardon me, I've been talking for so long and losing my voice. But yeah, these are great things. I think there's no wrong way to do it effectively if it results in the work getting out there and money exchanging hands for the work. Like that's a win.
I think so. Ann Connolly writes, I'm working on a graphic novel, Ryan, about blockchain for African youth with an artist in Kenya. The digital version will be free. Any advice about incorporating educational content in a comic format?
Yeah, that's a great question. Squirrel Girl has a lot of computer science in it, and it's real computer science I put in because I know it and I want to share it. I think it's really interesting. The challenge is always to avoid seeming didactic, to be like, you don't want to stop whatever's happening in the comic to turn to the audience and say, now here's how this works. Unless you can do that in a really interesting way. I find humor helps a lot. If there's a joke, people remember the laughter and the information kind of sneaks in behind the laughter without them noticing. I use that a lot. And my main advice for writing comedy that I use is I always write alone, because the only way I can tell that something is funny is if it makes me laugh. And it is so embarrassing to be seen laughing at your own jokes. I never go to a coffee shop and start typing going, oh, good joke, me, like mortifying. So I close the door, no one can see me when I write, and I try to make myself laugh at jokes. And if you go through that process of making yourself laugh, making it funny, the real message, the information you're trying to convey can sneak in and people will still be entertained and enjoy the process. But it's hard. It takes, I really recommend beta readers, beta testing, where you write something in the script format, have someone read it, and I recommend finding a friend who thinks you're really funny, because it's always nice to have that person like what you wrote, and have a friend who does not think you're funny, and they will tell you where all the weak points are, all the stuff you should fix or try to make less didactic. It's an iterative process, and it is a kind of a nebulous process, but it's what I've used for sneaking in information and making it feel like it's not a lecture, it's not a chore to do, but something that can be enjoyed.
Another comment here from Dave Perry again is that some people have actually copied his books on guerrilla marketing for HR and sold it as their own. Like, I don't know how Amazon would allow that to happen.
Amazon makes money by doing that, and this is this large corporation that does not care about you. You have they have technology that could show these books are functionally identical, but they don't use it. And so your only option is to shut it down. And then if you want to recover the money, you shut down through a DMCA request. If you want to recover the money, you're now in the legal system. And maybe you have a different opinion on this, Bruce, but I generally try to avoid the legal system wherever I can. It seems like a good way to spend a lot of money and not get much out of it.
So I do have a comment on that, Ryan. I am not a believer in paying legal fees. Back in the day, I have a few patents, Ryan. I have an industrial design patent on a golf textured frisbee that flies further than any.
I know that. I love this story.
On the planet. I have some other actually more useful patents as well. But the fact is that a lawyer told me years after I spent a few $100,000 on patents that a patent is only worth what you're willing to pay to defend it. So
absolutely,
a patent is only worth what you're willing to pay to defend it. So if you're Apple, the reason that Apple or Amazon for that matter, or Alibaba or Samsung, the reason that they have thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of patents isn't because they have any prospect of actually enforcing them. It's simply because they've weaponized them to resist attacks from other tech companies. Because it's very common for, say, Apple to sue Samsung, oh, you're in breach of our patents. And then Samsung says, well, we've got 20,000 patents over here, and you must be in breach of a few too, so we're going to countersue you. And then 7, 8, 10, 12 years later, and tens of millions of dollars of legal fees, you hear an announcement, Apple and Samsung have come to an agreement that they each can share each other's patents. So I am not a really big believer in intellectual property in the sense of spending a tremendous amount of money on patents to protect it. There's some very simple things that authors like Ryan and myself and others, Dave Perry and others on the call today, can do. For example, you can write on the bottom of your work, copyright Ryan North 2020, Ottawa, Canada, or Toronto, Canada. And copyright, as soon as you write that on anything you write, on a website or in a book or a blog post, as soon as you put copyright Bruce Firestone 2020, Ottawa, Canada, whatever, you are protected in many jurisdictions, not all, but many jurisdictions, you are protected against intellectual property theft. It provides you with, it's virtually free, and it provides you with some measure of protection. The other thing that seems to make sense to me is trademark. So if you have Dinosaur Comics and you put a trademark on that, that does give you some protection. It's not very expensive to do trademark protection in Canada, the United States. It's not prohibitively expensive. And it does provide you with some modest level of defense of your intellectual property. But much beyond that, I don't think you should go, because Ryan said in his presentation, he could spend every minute of every day, and his wife could spend every minute of every day of her days on sending out these notices. And what are you going to do? It's like whack-a-mole. There's just no possibility that you're going to be able to stop theft. So to me, the best way to put a wall around your garden is to have excellent content. I guess I'm going to give myself a pat on the back here, but I have a blog that I have over 100,000 individual readers who come to it on a regular basis. It's not as big as what Ryan's audience is, but it's 100,000 people for a 68-year-old, mainly focused on real estate and business, and a little bit of life thrown in there. And that blog has tremendous value to me, even though it's a free blog. It's free to everybody. I suppose people could copy it and cheat off of it. A lot of people will try and make sure that their source of information is reliable, that if they get a report that there's this anti-gravity device, they want to make sure that it's coming from a responsible party, not just somebody who made that up because he was smoking weed in his mom's basement. So I do think that there are models where you can provide good quality information, and the best wall you can create around you is to have wonderful material. So don't put anything on a blog or on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else that you haven't thought through, and you don't think, and it's up to your standards. Set some standards, set them as high as you possibly can, and then try and live up to them. And I'm sure Ryan does that. It's not random. The other thing that I want to emphasize to everybody, when people come to me and say, I'm going to start a business, here's what they say. Number one, I'm going to take on Facebook. Okay, great. I ask them what their tech budget is. And they say, oh, I've got $10,000 reserved for Facebook, for my Facebook clone. I say, oh, really? Facebook is in the billions and billions and billions of dollars building the front end and the back end of their system. $10,000 isn't going to cut it. And the other thing that I think people don't recognize, and this is very relevant to every business, whether you're Dustin Poole here running an architectural technology practice, it's not good enough to say my marketing is I'm going to put it on Twitter and Facebook. Ryan said this beautifully. He said it better than I could have ever done it. That Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of that stuff is what have you done for me lately? So when you're thinking about your quote unquote magic marketing button, your easy button, something you press and it works, and customers and clients show up, don't be telling me, because it's not going to pass muster with your professor, that you're all the marketing that you're going to do is free, and it's all going to be based on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and whatever on Instagram. It isn't going to work in all likelihood. Ryan had a head start on you guys. He started in 2003. That's 17 years ago. Would you say that's a fair summary, Ryan?
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. And I'd also point out that when I started my webcomic in 2003, people were already saying that the time to start a webcomic was 1997. Wow. And now it's impossible to get any traction. It always feels like you can look back and be like, oh, if I only done then for sure. But yeah, there are opportunities now. It's a different landscape. There's different opportunities, but you're not going. I've had people myself be like, I want to build the next Facebook. And social networks used to have a lifespan of maybe 4 or 5 years, and they disappear, and we'd all make new friends, a new site. And Facebook was the first that said, we don't want to disappear. We're going to be smart about this, and we're going to build software that lets you log into other sites with Facebook. So now you're tied to this platform, and we're going to make it as sticky and as strong as possible. Now we're still stuck with it, you know, a decade and plus later. That is not something that is going to go away very easily, and that is not something that you're going to defeat with a startup. Likely, it could happen, but it's not very likely. So I agree with everything you said there, Bruce.
Thank
I
you.
think it's
So,
good stuff.
Ryan, I've got one more question for you, and then I think we'll let you go because I'm going to spend about 15 minutes, just the last 15 minutes with the class, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
So I got one more question for you, and then everybody, we're going to wave goodbye to Ryan because he has a few other things that he has to do. And again, thank you for this. So I just want to go back quite a long time ago now, in 1993, when I served on the Board of Governors of the National Hockey League. I got to know Stan Jaffe a little bit. He was the head of Paramount Pictures in New York. And Paramount was pretty successful back then. You know, they made lots of movies, and they had all kinds of other things. It was a pretty big company. And they happened to own the New York Rangers, and Stan Jaffe served on the Board of Governors, and I sat next to him a few times, and I got to know him a little bit. And because I was sitting next to the head of Paramount Pictures, I thought, this is an opportunity for me to ask a question that here I am 30 years later, almost, I still don't know the answer to. So I'm going to ask you. So what I said to Stan is, Stan, how come you have so many highly paid people, like really amazing people? I mean, smart people, the smartest people you're going to find anywhere, you know, very well paid. And if you make 30 movies, you know, maybe 2 or 3 of them are hits. 6 or 7 of them probably break even, and the rest are horrible failures. How come with all these unbelievably smart producers, showrunners, you know, script writers, screenwriters, on and on, directors, you know, actors and actresses that you have in your family, your network, how come you have so few hits? You know, I would have thought with all the research you're able to do and all the cleverness you're able to gather under one tent, you would have far more hits and far fewer failures. And he said, this I think was 1993, he said, Bruce, if anybody ever tells you for the rest of your life, and I was a young man, I'm not so young now, but back then, he said, if anybody tells you they know how to create a viral hit, and I don't think he would have used the term viral, but it's the current term. He said, if anybody tells you that they know how to make something go viral, they're lying to you. Because with all the research and all the focus groups and all the clever people that we have never figured out how to create, you know, say a 90% success rate instead of a 10 or 15% success rate. So over to you. How do you create a viral hit today?
I mean, you don't. I think the most important lesson I learned, and I didn't learn right off the bat in working in a creative industry, is the following, and that is that in a real, I say real, in a classical job, in a place where you're working for someone and they pay you money, you work hard, you put in the hours, and you can get a promotion, you can get a raise, and you can move up in the company. There is a correlation between effort put in and result coming out. In any creative industry, that is completely disconnected. You can work really, really hard on something and nobody cares. And you can dash something off and people think it's the greatest thing ever. And if you try to measure success or try to measure your self-worth by how well these things perform in a creative industry, you're going to suffer all sorts of mental problems and heartbreak because there is no connection, and you're trying to connect these two dots that aren't connected, and you'll just go crazy being like, why did people like this? Let me analyze it more. Why did this movie flop when the other one was the same thing? There must be something I'm missing, and there's nothing you're missing except culture is always changing, people are always changing, people value novelty, and something that worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. So for me, it's not, I don't wake up and say, I'm going to make a viral hit comic today. I say, I'm going to make a good comic today. And I trust that over the course of the weeks and months that some of them will be more popular than others, but I don't value the comic or myself based off of that. So it's this,
Wow.
it's a recipe for madness to go the other way for sure.
I think that was absolutely fantastic, Ryan. And again, I just can't thank you enough. I enjoyed it. Everybody wave goodbye to Ryan. Thank you, Ryan.
All right, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Anne Connolly, I signed up for the mailing list of the graphic novel. It looks great. I want to see more of it. Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Well, guys, That was fantastic. I mean, I'm just I'm ready to fall off my chair. It was so good. I learned so much from Ryan. I hope you did too. I super enjoyed it. I'm just gonna. We've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm gonna just build a little bit on what Ryan was talking about, and this is really the critical dimension for you guys in Pivot, that you have to have, I've said it now, it must be 5 or 6 times, maybe 10 times in this course, you have to have a magic marketing button. And so what I wanted to do after Ryan finished, which was absolutely fantastic, and you can find Ryan on Twitter, you know, it's obviously something that he responds to. And if you need to get in touch with Ryan, you know, let me know, and I'll certainly ask him to reach out to you, because he is a wonderful man, a wonderful family man, and a good person, and obviously a brilliant guy. So I wanted to show you something called Steve Lowell's The One. This was something that my wife, Dawn McMillan, actually introduced me to. Steve Lowell's another coach, and he's a very, very clever guy. And he talks about how to go from obscurity to being the one. And that's what I'm setting out as a goal for everybody in Pivot. You know, and I'll show you how Steve Lowell's 4 levels apply to you and to me. So Steve Lowell says there are 4 different stages. 1, you start off in obscurity. And most businesses, when we start them, are obscure. I mean, Ryan's business, when he started back in 2003, was, you know, very obscure, right? But that's where most people are when they start out. But you don't want to live there, because if you live there, it's very hard to make a living. The second level is you become competitive. And that's where, if you know, for businesses that last longer than 5 years, that's probably where you are. So at that point in level 2, you could probably squeak out a living. You're sustainable in the sense that, you know, you're trading 4 quarters for $1, but you're not sinking. The third level is the branded level. So if you could get to the branded level, you can actually make a decent living at that level. But what Steve is saying, the challenge for all of us, including yours truly, is to become the one. If you can become the one, like when you think, you know, theme parks, you probably don't think MGM, you probably think about Disney. So Disney has successfully, I think, become the one. So what you want to try and do is you want to try and go from obscurity to the one. It's a big challenge, but that's the challenge that I've set out for you. How do you do that? Well, one of the things that Steve Lowell talks about, and I think Ryan North also hit on that, is that you want to become a trusted authority in your space. So you want people to think of you as a trusted authority. And obviously, Ryan has the trust of hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of readers. When you can build a brand, it means that you will attract more clients. That's obvious. You will end up with premium pricing. And again, when it comes from startups, most of the startups that I coach, they always come to me and say, look, my competition is charging $20. My differentiated value is I'm going to charge $5. And I go, well, if they're charging $20, why don't you charge $19? Why do you have to charge $5? Right? Maybe you could be a little less, but being just a little less in price is not differentiated value. It doesn't build trust. It doesn't create an aura about your business that you are an authority. So if you can get your brand to become well-known and well-trusted, you can have some premium pricing. And again, going back to what Ryan said, you want to build your own network. You don't want to rely on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You want to build your own network. And today that probably means an email list. Okay. And the way you build a moat around your offering, as I said to you, is by adding differentiated value. That's why I'm constantly saying to you guys, if you have a business model, Armin, you had a business model I kind of wasn't too keen on, you have to try and add some differentiated value. Something like combine this with that, some ways to create some differentiation and some room between you and the competition. All right, enough of that. You've seen this graph before from me. This was the missing link. The reason why you do marketing is not to build your brand. The reason you're doing marketing is to build trust. Trust creates an opportunity to sell. Selling creates, generates money that you can do more marketing. So marketing isn't just to build a brand, it's to build a brand that is trusted. And it's trust that allows you to create sales. So I want you to always be thinking, is what I'm doing today advancing my brand by making people trust me more? Okay, I hope that's clear as mud. And you know, I know this is a little self-centered, so you forgive me for this, but I am actually now close to becoming the one, or at least one of the ones, when it comes to real estate education. Okay, I've done a lot of business coaching, doing some of that with you guys, but on the real estate side, I think I am actually close to becoming the one. And Jill Coaster, I think she's still on the call here today. She gave me this beautiful testimonial. I asked her permission to use it, and she said, okay. She said, I just listened to your interview. I'm impressed. Thank you for doing this. I've been a huge Robert Kiyosaki fan, but I must say I loved your ideas even more. Well, to be compared to have my name and Robert Kiyosaki's name in the same sentence, you know, was really pretty cool. So, I think I am close to becoming part of that. So how did I do it? And this is the challenge to you, okay? So I put this out here for you. I actually got myself a coach when I left the University of Ottawa because I needed some help to figure out what I was going to do next. And she really helped me. She helped me find my why. And then I focused on being a great coach for 7 years. I put in like 21,000 hours of coaching. I'm not kidding. Coaching and teaching since I left the University of Ottawa. About 3,000 hours a year. Figure that out. I've got the 2 blogs that I developed, and they're on my own website, right? Or at least one of them is. And those readers belong to me, right? 100,000 of them. I have a YouTube channel. It's a small number, relatively speaking, but I have 250,000 views, and it would be much bigger, except that most of the stuff that I've done is unlisted and is not public, and it's for people, students like you guys, to look at, and it's not public. So it might be quite a bit higher, but I don't care about that. I'm not Katy Perry with hundreds of billions of views. I'm just a guy with 250,000 views, but it's the right 250,000 views that count. I do have a profile on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I can't count the number of free webinars I've given, and I've done quite a few paid keynote speeches. I do some pro bono work, not as much as I'd like to, but it's just simply I still work for a living. I've done hundreds, maybe even thousands of clarity calls, so people book me for a free clarity call. I don't mind doing them. I've developed hundreds of business models and case studies. I've developed the Prof. Bruce brand as being very down to earth, which suits me. It's not, again, it's not really fancy. It's just me. I've written dozens of books. Some of them were sponsored, as I mentioned earlier, and some of them are just given away. I was an early adopter of the Zoom platform. And this next point here is very important, I think, for some of you. I still find email marketing among the most successful marketing. And I know this is true in the National Hockey League, it's true in the NBA, so it's true in sports and entertainment, it's true in teaching and coaching, and it's true in a lot of areas. So developing your own email list is really important. So how did I get a 16,000 person email list? Well, I borrowed emails from other people. Now, what does that mean? You can't, under the CASL laws, the Canadian anti-spam legislation, actually, get somebody else to give you their email address book. I can't do that. But I could go, and I did go to business improvement associations. I went to organizations, like RAIN, the Real Estate Investors Network, in the early days. And I said, hey guys, can I advertise in your newsletter? And some of them didn't even have any advertising, but I could put some coaching information about what I'm doing in their newsletters. And then people would email me and ask me a little bit for more information. And that way I could legally acquire their email addresses. So that's a pretty good way of doing things. And I answer every single one of my emails, but maybe the people in the course are recognizing I'm a little bit behind. So I apologize to everybody. I'm at least a day behind on my emails, simply because I'm getting an awful lot of them. And there you go. So the way to think about your own business is, what are your expert insights? I told you, you have to have some skills. You can't just say, I'm going to go after Facebook if you have no technical skills, right? And Ryan, I wouldn't have known when he told me in 2003 he was going to write a comic strip, but that quirky intelligence, that brilliant mind of his, is obviously showing up every day in Dinosaur Comics and many other areas. So what are your expert insights? What is it that you do that you bring more value to than anybody else, or at least you hope? All right, so think about that. we're going to hear later in Pivot from Chris Long. I keep talking about Chris. He is a young man. You've heard about him before. I've talked about him before in the class and in the webinar before this class got going. And he runs longyards.com in Ottawa, which is really successful and is I think it's going to be $100 million a year business at some point. What is his magic marketing button, I asked myself. And I've got a few minutes, so I'm going to show you. And of course, we're going to hear it again. So some of it might be repeating, but this is what I need you to think about to get your existing business to the next level, or to get your startup to a level where you can make a living at it. You have to have this magic marketing button. So what is Chris's? Well, number one is on-site signage. I just borrowed this from his website. Just went on his website this morning when I was preparing these slides, and you can see as you go up and down Bank Street, which is a busy street in Ottawa, you can see all kinds of signage. That works for you 24/7, 365, day and night, and especially in a place like Ottawa, which is dark, half of the year. If you have lights on it, even better, people will actually be able to see it. And here's some of the other elements, and I'm just going to go whip through them. All right, lawn signs. One of the things I got Chris to do for his renovation company, which is called Conrad Construction, is every project you do, you put a lawn sign. Another project by Conrad Construction with an email address and a phone number. The reason an email address is important is a lot of people today are not comfortable talking on the phone. People have, they would rather text. And I learned a new word, ghosting. Right? So that means if you want to, divorce your wife or your husband, or you want to drop your girlfriend or your boyfriend, you just don't talk to them anymore, right? People are not used to, I didn't know that term, are not used to talking anymore. They want to text or they want to email. So put your cell number on a sign or an ad, and put an email address. You'll find a lot of people will text you, and they will email you before they will actually call you. All right, so he did some of that. And the other thing that he has to do as a renovator and as a contractor, he has to make use of Facebook marketing. We had a great lecture by Siavash Naruzian about that. And, despite what Ryan said earlier in this lecture, I think Facebook advertising and the Facebook marketplace is an important marketplace for a lot of different businesses. The best place to find new clients is often old clients. So again, for a renovation business like Chris, I said, Chris, why don't you, call all your old clients, or email them or text them, and see if they need help with anything else. So it's really important to keep in touch with your existing clients and your past clients. I do like videos. People today, young people especially, really like videos. And so when somebody contacts me with a question, I'll often have an unlisted video, or sometimes a public video on YouTube that they can watch and learn something. Start a blog. You can do that for free. Maybe do some free webinars. Webinars are great for almost every business, right? People will sign up for webinars. People are really interested in learning. They're interested in expanding their knowledge. And so people will sign up for webinars, and you can often, help with any kind of business doing that, right? Doing that. Let's see if there's some other things here. Oh, here's something one of my clients out of Waterloo are doing. It's called Ping. I don't know if you can see this on the screen here, but it's actually on my website. If you go to my website, brucemfirestone.com, you'll see that on the bottom right-hand corner now is this little one-line utility that I got from my clients, Huckleberry app. And it goes on your website, and it allows people to ping you. And what they're doing, and I have it on my website, you can try it if you want, is that they can put in a message or a question, and then they put in their cell number, and it goes to my phone. It's a text. So this is not like a chat box. It is like a text tool. So people can actually ping my phone, and I'm busy, doing things like this today with you guys, and so I can't do a live chat with people. It would be impossible. But people can go onto my website and say, I have a question about coaching, or I have a question about real estate, or I have a question about business or something else. Can you help me out? And that's a very powerful thing. That thing cost me $20 a year. It's fantastic. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll put you in touch with the boys in in Waterloo. So these are just some of the things that we do to create opportunities for our businesses to be successful. My dad and I, my dad's passed away. He was Professor O.J. Firestone. He was a professor of economics at the University of Ottawa. Passed away quite a while ago now. But my dad and I used to argue all the time. Argue is not the right word. Discuss what were the three most important things in business. And I said to Dad, the three most important things in business are sales, sales, sales. And my dad said, nope, it's check, check, check. My dad, he was a detail guy. Oh my gosh, much better at detail than I was. And what my dad would do is he would make sure things got done, and he would check everything twice. Like, he was amazing that way. He was, you know, the businesses that he operated as side hustles, because his full-time job was being a professor, but he had some very successful side hustles. For example, he started CJOH TV, which was a very successful television network in Ottawa. He started that in the 60s, right? So he had some side hustles that were pretty darn successful, and he made those things work because he was a detail guy. I was not much of a detail guy then. I am now, but I wasn't then. So I was always a sales guy. I was always driving the sales up. And I've come to the conclusion that they're both absolutely essential. If you don't have sales, you don't got a business. But if you don't check, you won't have a business either, because what's the point of having sales if you can't deliver the product on time, exactly up to spec, right? With as few deficiencies or defects as possible. So I've come to the conclusion that I guess both of us were right. And the two most important things in business are sales, 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 and check, check, check. So we're at 1:30 now, guys. I hope you enjoyed Ryan's lecture as much as I did. I really, really appreciate people showing up for Pivot, and we've got a lot more to go. See y'all. Bye, Dustin. Bye, Barbara, Jason, Kent, everybody, Paula. Good to see you, Armin, Belinda, Malcolm, everybody. I'll see Katie. See you later, guys.